There have been so many changes to the meta in the past week, so I'm going to go over what's been changing, how to play all the new comps that I added to the tier list. I believe that I added 3 of them, and I also made a bunch of adjustments for all the S and A tiers, so you guys know exactly what is going on with the very best comps out right now. We are into the second week of the B patch for 11.24 for Teamfight Tactics, and essentially whenever there's a long patch, a lot of things will change. It's not always the same thing as it is the first week, and the reason behind that is because people adapt to counter different things, or people discover new comps that weren't really discovered before, and then all of a sudden everyone starts playing them. The first one that comes to mind is the Socialite plus a random carry. This one is probably by far the most popular comp right now. We're going to go into how to play each and every one of these, what to do when the Socialite hex is on like first square, second square, third square, fourth square, and we have a ton of B tiers that are actually pretty playable. You just need to pick your spots. So I'll tell you when to go for each and every one of them. And then to cap it off, I will tell you what starting items to go for in the starting carousel, along with what comps you should play with each of them. So starting at the S tier, we have Socialite plus carry. This one is going to be either carry Kai'Sa, Tahm Kench, Akali, or Victor. You could also do carry Galio, but I think the first 4 are all better, with probably Kai'Sa being the best. However, when you play this comp, you kind of go for whatever you can get, and you are bound to hit one of them eventually. So onto the next build, we have Chemtech Urgot. This is the best 4-cost build right now. And yeah, in terms of the build, it is very similar to what we've been seeing before, but with the changes to 5 Chemtech, I've been seeing that quite a bit, and they also are changing their itemization up a little bit, which I'll share in just a second. Snipers, there are a bunch of different sniper builds right now. Believe it or not, there are even some sniper builds that only go Jihn carry without actually adding a sniper. I'll give you a bunch of different variations for snipers and also tell you when to go for each one. Onto the A tier, we have Yone, Scrap, and Arcanist. Yone, typical 4-cost. He's a little weaker than everything else right now, it seems, but he's still usable. He just needs a very specific setup. Broken, if you guys haven't checked out the video on this yet, it's pretty much free wins if you get like a decent start for it or like a good augment. Arcanists, I feel like Arcanists are my sleeper pick for the patch. They are starting to get popular. I don't think they're OP. They're only good if you're not too contested, but I feel like recently they have been more contested, but I'll keep them in the A tier for now. But I feel like most people slept on this comp in the last week. Onto the B tier, all playable, all good to go. You just need specific setups. Syndicate, Protector Reroll, Tristana Reroll, Fiora, this works really well with the Socialites, by the way. Innovator. Innovator's a little weaker now. That's why they're in the B tier. If I'm playing Innovator, I normally go Jihn carry, but then I'd rather play one of the sniper builds. Innovators are still good in the early to mid game, though. Right now, some Seraphine builds are actually quite popular. Twitch Reroll is really fun. Man, I can't tell you how many times this has rolled over a lot of comps in the mid game. It does fall off eventually, so you do need to transition into something better much later into the game. Heimerdinger, this is a new comp. There's a Heimer build going around with like Scholar. Some people use like Socialite, a bunch of different variations. I'll try to go over both, but I feel like the Scholar one is slightly better. Mutant Malzahar, this one is just a typical mutant build, and then you go into Kai'Sa later. It's a little weak right now because everyone is playing the Socialite Kai'Sa nonsense, so they are stealing all of your Kai'Sas. Samira carry is also pretty good. This is a 3-cost carry. I think this is like the only 3-cost carry in the SA and B tiers right now. And the reason why it's down here is because the pacing of the game just doesn't allow Samira to shine quite as well as she has in the past. That's why she is in the B tier. C tiers, these are still playable if you get like a lot of them. There's still one guy going like only assassins, but he's been playing only assassins since like set 1. But that's the only guy I've seen do well with this build. But yeah, Trundle reroll, Misfortune, Katarina, Warwick, Yordle, Veigar, Gangplank. Lissandra reroll, it kind of can fit in the Heimerdinger build, but that's more of a Heimerdinger build than a Lissandra build. But that is the summary of what the best comps are right now. Before we get into how to play each and every single one of them, a brief word from our sponsor. Whether you're playing Teamfight Tactics, League of Legends, or Valorant, I have the recording solution for you. SquadOV is a platform that allows gamers and their friends to improve together and share clips using recorded video. SquadOV automatically records all of your games, but it does also synchronize your gameplay with captured game data, allowing you to pinpoint exact spots where things went well and things went wrong. After the match is over, you can go ahead and click on a specific game, and maybe you can review some of the augment choices that you made in the past. The best part about this is that SquadOV automatically captures your game, so you do not have to press a record button. Your footage is also stored in the cloud so that you don't have to waste any space on your hard drive if you don't want to. Go ahead and download SquadOV, the link is in the description below, and good luck in all of your games. Alright, we are back. Let's get into this Socialite build that we've been hyping up for quite a bit. I introduced this a little bit in the last week, but people didn't know that like a lot of the other units could be used as carries, but Tahm Kench, Viktor, Kai'Sa, Akali, all of these guys are just top tier. Galio is still playable if you do the Clapio build, but like the other ones are so much better, I don't know why you would ever bother with this. And also, notice the itemization. GA Archangels, GA Archangels, GA Archangels, GA Archangels on all of these guys. They all share the same items, Galio doesn't, so we could go for one of these other four. So what do you do if the Socialite Hex is in the front row? Well, you go Tahm Kench or Akali carry, same for second row. You could even do Kai'Sa carry in the second row if she has a Guardian Angel. I don't like it as much because sometimes she gets hit by a lot of CC before she casts, but it is still possible if you get a Kai'Sa 2-star, but again, Tahm Kench and Akali preferred in the front 2 rows. In the back 2, Viktor and Kai'Sa, those are going to be your bread and butter. Share the Spotlight is really good with these guys, and also any other Socialite augments are going to help them a lot. But the only weird itemizations is for third item, Tahm Kench likes Ionic Spark a lot. You reduce magic resist of people near you, and he's a melee champion, and it just gives the most damage. Akali, she's going to want the IE, and then you add in an assassin to complement her. So if you do run Akali, run like a Shaco with this build. Keep in mind, like most of the units I'm showing here, they're just like the core units, like Seraphine, Janus, Sion, and Taric. And Galio, those are like the core, I'd say, and then you just add on one of the carries and add in complementary synergies for them. So for example, with Akali, you probably want to put in an assassin, Kai'Sa, a challenger, or some mutants, etc, etc. For the backline, Kai'Sa's third item, I feel like Morello is the best. You could also go like Spear of Shojin or Rageblade, that one is also fine. Viktor, Spear of Shojin, Giant Slayer, or more damage is also welcome. You don't need Spear of Shojin as badly on Viktor in this build compared to other Viktor builds, because your frontline lives for so long that he's going to cast no matter what. So if you put on like double damage items on him after the GA, he'll do just fine. So I will warn you guys that this comp is a little more tricky to play because you have to bounce around a little bit, and you have to also figure out who your mid-game carry is, because it literally can be anyone's. Like, it's just whoever fits with your items. Sometimes you use like Lissandra, sometimes you use like Malzahar. It really depends on the game, so it is a pretty difficult comp to play. So only go this build if you have a good start for it, and if you are confident in hitting one of the legendaries, such as having like a lot of HP to do that. Onto the next build, we have Urgot. So itemization change, I like GA a lot now. Before I had triple damage on him. In the beginning, people were doing GA a lot, and then they went triple damage, and then now they're back to the GA. The reason behind this is because you build GA because you're trying to go Socialite most of your games, so you might have a leftover GA to put on Urgot, and also against stuff like Assassins or things that one-shot him, the GA is going to be critical. Like if you're against a Lux, if you're against like the Viktor, for example, Viktor will have to cast twice to kill him. GA just helps a lot there. For the 4 bruisers up front, we have Mundo, Kench, Vi, and Zac. This should be a pretty no-brainer because Zac and Mundo are Chemtechs. Vi gives the sister synergy to Jinx, and then Tahm Kench, I mean, he's just a legendary, gives infinite items. That's why you run him. Janna for Scrap's really useful because Scrap plus Jinx gives you a lot of value. Scrap, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Scrap is pretty OP. People just haven't realized it until now. Like even 2 Scrap is enough because it gives so much shielding to your team. So let's get on into the Sniper Jhin build. So Sniper Jhin, lots of different variations. This build was sent to me by a person named Steve. He doesn't really stream or anything, but he does play a lot in the NA ladder. And essentially, his build revolves around having a Jace carry in the back complementing the snipers, and you also run a Caitlyn because Caitlyn kills a random unit. And then for the front line, it's always going to be Braum and Blitzcrank because you get the scrap value with Blitzcrank and Janna, and then you also get Braum as your main tank. The reason why you run scrap is if you read the trait, you'll see that scrap works for items equipped on like any unit on your team. They contribute to the scrap shield. So essentially running a Blitzcrank, if you're already running Janna, gives you around like 2500 health, which is quite a bit for just one random unit. Also, the hooks are very annoying for people to deal with. So yeah, he brings a lot of value to the team in that way. You could play Leona as well instead of one of these bodyguards, but this build is pretty good. You could run this build without a Caitlyn and a Jace and put in a Sion instead. Sion gets protected from the Blitzcrank, so you get even more synergies in that way. Also, not a lot of people play Sion, so if you're rolling down and you're aiming for either Braum or Sion, whoever you 2-star first is going to be a great mid-game tank during stage 4, so a lot of people are doing that right now. Of course, Jhin's in the backline still. Last Whisper, i.e. Giant Slayer, are always going to be his best in slots this set, but if you don't have these exact items, it's okay. Just any attack damage items will do. But yeah, for some of these like comps, you could check out some gameplay. I like do a little link there. And if you guys want to see an example of these comps in action. Of course, all of this is available on my website at bunnymuffins.lol. And of course, I've been updating this every week for the past like year or two. I forget how long now. But on to the next build, we have Yone. Yone, he's very weird because like he requires such specific items. He is not as consistent as the other 4-cost carries as we've seen before. However, he does use a GA very well. So if you are going for the Socialite build, you randomly hit Yone with like a bunch of challengers, it's going to be an easy transition to just go into Yone. Whenever you're playing this build, you always want to play as many challengers as possible, because that is just the stat that gives Yone the most DPS at the moment. Items for him, like QSS is pretty good because you just can't get CC'd. He's just so much better if he doesn't get CC'd, obviously. And then Runon's just gives the most damage because both him and his clone benefit from it. And then after that, like again, I've seen Spirit Shojin on Quinn. It's been pretty good. Fiora can be used as a secondary carry using like Hand of Justice, Jeweled Gauntlet, i.e. like Bloodthirster. Lots of different items work on her. So if you ever are in a game with like a ton of items, itemizing both of them is pretty cool. Onto the next build, we have Scrap. This is a new build. Well, it's not really that new, actually. I had it in the last week. I just didn't build out the thing for it because I didn't have time. But this is the 6 Scrap build. You want to take advantage of the 6 Scrap buff because it allows you to get a ton of items for free. So I'll tell you what item components to put on each of the champions. I have it over here. Bow on the Ezreal, Tear on the Echo, and then defensive items on Blitz and Trundle, and then whatever you have left over, put it on Janna. And Jinx can use either a bow or a sword, but you ideally want 3 damage items on her to really maximize her damage because she's your main carry. You actually don't need many carries in this build because you just use Ezreal as an item holder, sell him, and then put all the items on Jinx. And then if you get like a Scrap emblem, you don't need Ezreal anymore, so you free up some spots. But I'd say the items you want to build the most are the Morello on Echo and a GA, just so that when you get Jinx, you have it, and you could also flex into other builds that use the GA, such as the ones we saw before. The reason why tears on Echoes are so important is because the earlier he gets his cast off, the faster Morello starts ticking down on people, and the faster he gets his buff on both your teammates and the debuff on the enemy. You may notice we have 1 extra slot. We only list 7 champions here. You could literally play any legendary, any random synergy that you see here. You just have to adapt it based on your lobby. Whenever you play the Scrap build, you always want to get like the Scrap augments, obviously. Everyone knows that already. But Phony Frontline's pretty interesting because you get to have a lot of shielding added to the Phony Frontline because it affects your whole team. Binary Galaxy, extremely, extremely good because you don't need to like triple item anyone. You could literally just spam items and then like just have 1.5 items on each champion, and then you get a lot of free items. So binary airdrop is definitely really good. First aid kit, you get a lot of shields, and then any item augment is really, really nice because you just get an extra item. And again, if you have stuff like binary, it just complements each other so well. And pretty much everyone in this comp can use every single item, so you get a ton of value from it. It also adds to the Scrap shield, as we discussed before. So on to the next build, we have Aracanist Lux. This build is really hit or miss if you're forcing it, but if you flex into it, it's pretty good. I'm not saying you can't force it. Of course, you can force like pretty much any build in TFT, but it is much better if you don't, because you are very reliant on hitting Yordles early. You are very reliant on hitting Vex at a relatively decent time, and then you're very reliant on getting perfect Lux items with a Lux 2, because Lux 1 with perfect items does nothing. Lux 2 with mediocre items, she doesn't do that much either. You also have to be aware of a lot of counters to Lux, which is GA. Everyone's running GA right now, so it is a little tricky to play this comp. But it's still not that bad if you get a good start for it. Play as many Arcanists as you can, buff Lux up, you don't actually have to rely on Victor. Victor kind of isn't that great. He's very overrated in this build. If you ask a lot of the top Arcanist players, they don't play Victor that much because he just doesn't cast because your front line's so weak. It's like a Vex, she got nerfed so much, Taric not that strong of a tank, and Swain not that strong of a tank. So essentially what happens is, you could have all the Victor items in the world. He is not going to cast in time before you lose the fight. So like the times where he does cast, your whole team's already dead. So he kills like half the enemy team, but it's still like a 5v1 on a Victor. And that's just not going to end up going so hot for you. So the only time you play Victor is if you get 4 Scholar. And if you do manage to get that, okay, you could play Victor, put items on him, and you'll be fine. But focus on the Lux. You need Yuumi. She gives Academy, and she just gives a lot of CC. And yeah, you're pretty much just playing around Lux most of the time. Build, oh yeah, I have like item samples down here if you want to check it out. And like Malzahar's your mid-game standard leveling. You use Twisted Fate in the very beginning. Oh yeah, also you need 1 healing augment. Celestial or Thrill of the Hunt, extremely good on this build because then Lux doesn't get popped by something stupid. Of course, if you have the Arcanist shield, that one is really good. Obviously, if you're going Arcanist, all of the Arcanist emblems are gonna be pretty good, except for the one that's like Spellblade. Don't take that one yet. So onto the next tier, we have the B tier. These are all still good. You just prefer the other ones, but we're gonna go ahead and check out the Syndicate build. Reroll Shaco is a thing right now. They go for Shaco 3, or you just go for a Kali in the late game and put her on the Socialite. Anyways, it's very similar to the other Socialite build, except you'd run Syndicates as well. So lots of different options here. If you get a lot of Shacos, go ahead and keep playing him because, yeah, he's going to be popping some people. It's just hard to hit 3-star 3 cost right now because the pace of the game is just not very friendly for it because the power spikes of the 2-star legendaries happen, I'd say, like before you get a 3-star 3 cost, and then like you lose 1 or 2 rounds before you actually complete the Shaco 3, and then by that time he's not even as strong as the other dude, so it's like, what's the point? But onto the next build, we have Protector Reroll. This is with the Kog'Maw carry. Kog'Maw just runs Rageblade and 2 other damage items, and he is really, really, really strong. You don't have to reroll the Protectors either. Some people just go into a regular Mutant build after this if you don't get a lot of the 1-cost units. So if you have like really good Kog'Maw items, get the Cog 3, but don't focus too hard on the Castanin and Garen. Only go for them if you get a lot of them at the start of the game. Onto the next build, Yordle Tristana. I don't really like this build that much, but I see a lot of like high-level people vouching for it. It's just weird seeing a Tristana because why aren't you just going like Jihn carry with these items when Jihn's so good? But I guess if you get like a ton of Tristanas in the beginning of the game, like why not go for her? So that's the only time I would recommend going for this build. Onto the next build, we have Fiora carry. This one is like similar to the Socialite build. So you could actually use Fiora as like an item holder, especially since she uses GA so well. Archangel's not so much, but it's not like horrible on her. But you could just use her as an item holder as you transition into that Socialite carry build much later into the game. Onto the next build, we have Innovator. Innovator, again, I'm not a huge fan of anymore, but you could do Seraphine carry. You could do like Shojin Morello Rageblade on her. It's not bad, but ever since they changed the Innovator augments, it's just not as good as before. Surprise, surprise. Not saying it's bad, but you just rather go other stuff right now. Of course, if you have like my most preferred carry for Innovators is running a Jihn, and there's so many other Jihn comps that are better and easier to play into without relying on playing around the like silly Innovator stuff. The Dragon's still good, don't get me wrong. So if you get 7 Innovator, like you'll probably get second because it falls off eventually. Unless you drastically swap up your team and just play like super legendaries after using the dragon to like level up to level 9 really easily. But I'm digressing. Onto the next build, we have Twitch Reroll. This is like the 1-cost reroll build that's really popular because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 1-cost units. You don't have to get all of them, but I'd say Twitch is the only one you really need. But if you get some of the other ones, it's like no harm, no foul. You could also go into a lot of Assassins if you don't get the other people 3-star and just buff up your Twitch as much as possible. Very, very strong during the mid game. Does fall off late game, but if you get a Kali with good Akali items, she could still do work on her own. So just make sure you're able to get that to that point and only go for this build if you start the game with a ton of Twitches. Next build, we have Heimerdinger carry. This one's been like getting popularity in like, I'd say the past couple days. It wasn't really that popular like at the start of the week or at the start of the patch. I think people have been starting to figure this out a little bit. Also, not too many people were playing Vex, so Vex was much easier to hit, but now more people are playing Vex, so I don't think this build is going to be as reliable as it was in the past couple days, which is why I left it in the B tier. But you want to go for Heimer 3, Vex 3, like you 1 damage carry, 1 tank carry, as with most comps. And blue buff, Heimerdinger, very necessary. IEJG, I like that combo the most, but you could also do Archangel's Hat or other AP items. Vex does the standard like Bramble, Dragonclaw, but I've been liking Quicksilver a lot in this build and in the Arcanist build because a lot of people are running Tahm Kench. And the only way to stop Tahm Kench from eating your main tank and the only guy on your team that can tank for anything is by building a QSS. So it's unfortunate that it is necessary, but if you're facing Tahm Kenches, you just need this item, and Tahm Kench is just in the meta right now. Socialite Hex, you could actually take advantage of third row Socialite Hex really well on Heimerdinger because he only has 3 range. So that's why you see this weird positioning here. You might be saying like, oh, normally I put my Heimerdinger in the back row or my main carry in the back row. Put him in the third row, it's perfectly fine to do because, again, of his range. Instead of Zyra, you could run Lissandra, and of course if the Socialite Hex is really good, run more Socialites. You could add in like a Seraphine, for example. On to the next build, we have Mutant Malzahar. Okay, so your Kaises are getting stolen. Mutant Malzahar is being stolen by the Arcanists. Scion's being stolen by some of the Jihn comps, so unless you get a ton of Malzahars, a ton of Cho'Gaths early, like I'm talking about like stage 3, you have like 2-star Cho'Gath, 2-star Malzahar after like a small roll down maybe, then you go for this comp. Mutant buff also has to be really good. Essentially what you want is stuff that buffs Malzahar. You could also go Kog'Maw carry, but if you go Kog'Maw carry, I prefer the other build, which is the Protector reroll comp. But if you're going for Cho'Gath, it's a little trickier to do because you can't add in the Twin Shot and the Sniper as easily because you have fewer slots to play with. But if the Mutant's decent, if you like, you could do some weird stuff as well. Let's say it's the Cybernetic Mutant and you have like items that are readily available for all of your different mutants. You could still use it and have it perform at a decent level. Just make sure you have the right items for each mutant buff. So like for Cybernetic, you want attack damage items on your Kog'Maw. On Darkstar, you want stuff like Phony Frontline and Zizirot Portal. On the Elderwood mutant, you want like Hextech Gunblade on Malzahar. So always adjust your build to whatever mutant you have and like make sure that all that is set in stone before you really commit to the build. So onto the next build, we have Imperial Samira reroll. No one really plays this anymore because again, 3 cost carry is just not that strong right now because you can't get them to 3-star reliably, and the legendaries just smash them too hard in stage 5. But if you get a ton of Samiras, it's still gonna work. The best in slot item Samira is actually like Last Whisper, i.e. Assassin Spatula, but it's really hard to get the Assassin Spatula, but it is something to consider. If you get really good Imperial augments, that can also make you go for this build. But all in all, the strategy is still the same, or the leveling pattern. You slow roll at 6 for Swain or Talon 3 if you are close to them. If not, you could just forget all that. Just go straight to level 7 and reroll for Samira 3 and go from there. She's your main carry. Make sure you put items on her and call it a day. C tiers, we're gonna do a speed run of these. Trundle, like if you get featherweights, is really good. Runons is the most important item on him. After that, like Bloodthirster, QSS is great for keeping his uptime and keeping his health up. You could play like the 6 scrap build with him also. Really promising, but I do prefer the regular scrap way where you just level up and play for a Jinx carry. Next up, we have Sniper Misfortune. I don't know why you'd be playing this because Sniper Jinn's just a lot better, but if you're going for snipers in the mid game and then all of a sudden you just like only get Misfortune items, I guess you could kind of try for the reroll. It's just not as good as everything else right now. Assassin Katarina, again, if you are an assassin expert, keep playing assassins because that's all you know. But if not, like I really don't see a point for going for this build unless you have a ton of Katarinas. Like you have like 5 Katarinas in stage 3, maybe you could consider rerolling for this. Next up, we have Warwick reroll. Really good build actually, if the conditions are met. So like you need good Warwick items. It's like the ones you see here, or like Static Shiv is also really nice, but there just aren't many times where he's gonna be winning you the game. So even with great Warwick starts, you might get like a 3rd or something, you know. I just never see this comp win, And if you do win, it's not because of Warwick, it's because of some like other stuff that happened, such as being able to win streak the whole time and then pivoting into like a level 9 board at some point. And it's never really the Warwick doing the work. It's like, yeah, it's just like getting for third. That's good enough, I guess. But like, I feel like other comps are better than that. So just don't try to go for this that much, I would say. Yordle Veigar, I don't need to talk about this. Just don't go for that. Let's get into the items. Lots of different things you could do. I personally like Bow the most because Urgot just feels so easy to play and reliable. GA components are next because the Socialite build and like Chain's good in a lot of other stuff. For Bramble Vest, for example, it's good for like Sunfire Capes early if you're into that stuff. Sword, you need it for all the AD comps. You need it for Jihn, you need it for Urgot, etc, etc. Belt's probably like the most rounded defensive item right now, especially for the early game, and it builds stuff like Redemption, which is built a lot. Rod, if you're going Arcanist, go for Rod. Tier, same thing. Glove, I've actually been disappointed with. It really doesn't build that much if you think about it. Like, Thieves Gloves is, I don't really like that. IEJG obviously is a great combo, but you need a very specific item for that. And like, of course, any item is good if you get specific items for it. So you can't just say like, oh, IEJG, great, so let me go for gloves a lot. Unless IEJG is literally the meta, which it is not right now. Last Whisper's good, but I don't like it early game. Trap Claw, not that good. QSS, not that good early game. Shroud, while really good against all the Socialite players, again, you want that in the late game, not the early game. So yeah, I just don't like starting my game with a glove. Negatron, it's not horrible. It builds Runons, it builds Stoneplate, it builds Ionic Spark, but those are really the only 3 items that are good on it right now, so I prefer everything else. It's not like the end of the world if you get the Negatron Cloak, but like that's why I like the other stuff more, because they just build more things that are more important. You can take a brief look at like the item quadrant down here, but again, like I would just pay attention to the items for your specific comp, because like especially like GA is just going to be really good right now because a lot of builds are using it. Same with Archangels, same with like Last Whisper in attack damage comps. So just look out for those items. And yeah, just to sum up again, guys, let's go back to the top. If you are wanting to play the Socialite build, go ahead and keep doing it. It's really, really strong. Just a little tricky to play, so just be careful if it's your first time. Be prepared to pay like the LP tax. If not, like, if you want to just spam 1 or 2 comps like Chemtech, Urgot, Snipers, they complement each other pretty well because they share a lot of the same items. And then like Scrap, if you get a good Scrap augment early and you're like, oh, I know this is going to be a Scrap game, super, super good for like, I don't know why it wins. It just wins. Like, it's so hard to explain. And then Arcanist, if you want to be that guy, play Arcanist. I'm going to try to play a lot of Arcanist this patch because I just want to experiment like one-tricking a comp, and I just want to try out those guys. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me today. Let me know feedback down in the comments below. Also, like, Merry Christmas if you guys are into that. And I'll see you guys like more daily uploads, hopefully. And yeah, next tier list update will probably be around the new year. So I'll see you guys there. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe. And of course, smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.